I said I try good life now, but not life, more like private data.
Yeah,
Anyway, excuse me again.
I can hear you. I can hear you. It's just that it's muffled. You know, imagine that you're like in an enclosed space or something. So, but I'll hear you. Can you? Did you say something that I needed to respond to?
No, no, no. I really a joke.
Okay.
Really a big joke.
Okay. Okay. All right.
All right. So yeah, without an introduction, yeah. So let me just do this. Welcome everybody to this session where we tell you stuff. Oh wow, that's so. This is Nigeria.
It's all right. No problem.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, let's get like that.
Okay, Arinzi, I'm back online. I guess you are too.
Yeah, I really apologize about the
No
um,
problem.
delay so far. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so let's get started. Yeah. Um, Good everyone, welcome to this session, Get in Tech session, where we help you see reasons why front-end development is a career choice for you. What have here with me is Daniel Pinero, CTO, co-founder, Evolve Tech. So I'll start by meeting Daniel. So yes, Daniel, over to you. How is it?
Oh, okay. So I'm supposed to introduce myself. Yeah, my name is Daniel. I'm founder and CTO at Go Credit. And it's nice to be here. Thank you, Arinze, for inviting me. Um, yeah, basically, what do I lead tech, front end and back end, and infrastructure at Go Credit, and also job graduation. What we're trying to do. So what we're trying to do at Go Credit is make credit accessible to Africans and also in a wider scope, and we're building the infrastructure that would enable that. But previously, I've worked in a few places, not a lot of places, but I've done some useful work at African Leadership Academy. I've worked in consulted a big brand also for an agency in South Africa. Then I did some consulting in Nigeria also for um, find worker there, a tech talent organization that help also do agency work for big corporations. Um, yeah, and then I'm currently out of I'm deferring education, so I can't tell you I graduated with something because I have after graduation, taking a break. So yes, but I'm taking a sabbatical from my computer science and philosophy, major in computer science and minor in philosophy, major in African University of Beirut, Lebanon. So yeah, that's really good. But right now, I'm 100% working on both things.
Oh wow. Okay. You know, probably the design. That's like the part a lot of people are looking out for. Like, most co-founders are probably always looking out for and stuff like that. But
Yeah. Don't
yeah,
drop out of school. Don't drop out of school. It's not the best idea, but it might be very
exactly.
useful.
I also like to say something about that because then the audience like, oh, okay, I get an insight from that.
Yeah. Don't be
Okay.
crazy.
So can you basically tell us how you got into the engineering space and how you made a choice to settle for software development, front-end, back-end, GCP, both
Yeah.
full stack? Yeah. So can you
Yes.
tell us like a bit about how you got into software development space?
So I'll just say, kind of like, I always wanted to create things, right? I never knew about software development as a child, but I always knew about engineering because I'm parents university. So, like personally, the kind of things that excite me is just like, okay, how can I create stuff, build stuff? So I think that's just an inherent thing that I have. But how did I get started? So I was doing a diploma in Federal College of Education, Makoka, here in Lagos. I have a computer, and then I kind of like just stumbled on software development. So I was in church, and then there was a software engineer in church, and I was like, hey, are you interested in this thing? We're doing training and stuff. And I joined, and I liked it, and I picked it up from there. And that was in I think 2014. I think 2013 between 2013 2014 was this time. Yeah. And yeah, that was how I really got started. I just kept learning and building stuff by myself, and then an opportunity came from here and there. I got better and got better, and yeah, I just started doing. I mean, essentially, it's just like I wanted to create stuff. I was very curious, so I wanted to be first. I wanted to be an electrical engineer, then I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, then I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. We all want to be all those things, but the point really, when I look back, is more like I just wanted to be able to make stuff. And I think the easiest way to make useful things, I would say right now, because engineering, hardware engineering, and all this things are a bit more tedious and they take more time. But I think the easiest way to make stuff, I think, is software. I'd say, in my opinion, because all the resources you need to learn are on the internet and you just need a computer. So I started coding in general, just writing code to build desktop apps back back in 2014. And then I learned about Frontend, I learned about the web, and then I started learning about mobile, then I was just building everything I could build. And yeah, now I'm building well credits with those skills. In terms of like settling, I do more of backend engineering now, but I've done most of my consulting days. I did a lot of front end. Um, and it wasn't for me. It was just like, okay, what do you need to build and what do I need to learn? Um, but settling for backend right now for me is more like a responsibility. But I think I prefer it as well. So it's more like it's my responsibility. It's a bit more integral to infrastructure and getting solving the problems that we needed to solve. We both credit, and so it was just like, yeah, it's a natural thing for me as a CTO to just be more focused on right now. But I hope that answered the question. I can clarify if you have
Yes.
follow.
So yes, guys. So that I'm very sure you've been able to stir up the curiosity for the audience right now. They're probably wondering, so what's content development about? What's software engineering whole about? I think I always want to ask a question. What are the roles of content developer? What's seeing the life of the developer like? So we have a case study we're working with, yeah, for this guest discussion. Yeah, somewhere in 2015, I think the story that inspired the birth of Piggyville. We had this lady who had done a savings challenge, and then she put 1,000 naira every day for 365 days. At the end of the year, she got her piggy bank and had 365,000 naira cash. And the thing was like, oh, how about we decide this process for a lot more Nigerians and Africans and help them cultivate the culture of saving. So I think this is the mission, right? I think this is how startups start. They set out to solve problems or to make the life of people easier. So now, given this problem or given this mission, what role does a front-end developer play to bring this entire mission to life? What does front-end development mean as regards this mission? What's life in day-to-day life in life of a front-end developer, and what are your things?
Yeah, good question. So when you think about software engineering in general, like in the past, like um, when I was let's say 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, the way people build software was you just built everything together, right? So there wasn't really front end and back end. There was just software, there was just web applications, there was just that. Like the first versions of Facebook was just like that. It was just everything all together. But as you know, technology got better, people realized that okay, it is more efficient to do things differently. And so they separated front end and back end. And what that means is when you think about front end is basically the front. Right? So think about as the name implies, front end is the front, back end is the back. And so front end development is basically the process of making the user facing part of the software, because now the entire software, the whole thing has been divided into two, and now there's a front end and back end. So the front end is basically that part where people can interact with, regular users can interact with, like a GUI. The GUI as a graphical user interface. So basically, essentially, front end development has to do with everything that an engineer or a developer does when they are creating graphical user interfaces for customers to interact with the software, with the product. So yeah, that's basically what front-end engineering or front-end development is. You'd have to do things around design, user research, the lots of other things. When you get into a proper system where everything is done well, you'll be exposed to a lot of things in like even psychology, like what people how people behave, how do they use it. There's a lot of thought that goes into designing user experiences so that customers can interact with the software the way that they should, and the way that makes them get to the solution, right? Yeah, essentially that's it for front end development. It's just um, the art of creating the graphical user interface of your software. And there's the back end where there's no graphical user interface. It's just a lot of gibberish going on. The front end is like how do you interact with it. One other way to describe it is this. If you think about a building, a house, for instance, you can see my curtains behind. You can think about that. You can see the roofing, you can see the lights, you can see the painting, it's painted white and all of that. If you think about it that way, if this house was software, then all this painting, the door, the couch in my living room, all of these things are the front end, you might say. So the back end would be the you could say the foundation, the structure itself, and all of those things might be back end in some way, but essentially the front end is what you interact with on the day to day when you use the software.
Okay, so to this picture, so now you work at Vortex. So let's assume what Vortex is building now is a savings platform. Yeah, or even what you do at Vortex when you build loan infrastructure for Africa, enabling access to credit. What's the day-to-day life for a front-end developer? What does he do? Let's bring us back up and type to the end.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so for our front end engineers, people who I interact with, and sometimes I do some work on the front end too. Um, Essentially, okay, for a regular for everyday work, it's more like you can't like just implement features. But I'll take it more from a product perspective, right, rather than a front end perspective, and then I'll slide into the front end part, which is as a front end engineer, you're literally working with the back end engineer, you're working with the product manager, you're working with the product designer. And so as a front end engineer, you're writing some form of code, right? You're writing either React, JavaScript, or a variant of React of JavaScript. So React, TypeScript, Vue.js, and all the other frameworks depending on what your team is using. But on a day-to-day, you're writing code, right? You're solving problems every day. But on the flip side of that, how are you doing it? Like there's a product manager that is literally that is helping to define the features of, let's say, our product. And what you are doing as a front end engineer is implementing that. Now on our team, to be more precise, we don't have all the all the ingredients to make up an ideal and fully fleshed um, product team. So we have a UX designer, but we don't have a UX researcher. We have a product manager, but we don't have some other elements. Like it's not the most robust thing that you might have. So on my team, our front end engineers actually talk to customers, and we make it a thing that everybody on the team talks to customers, right, at some point in some way, form, or shape, so that everybody gets a feel of what the customers are struggling with. Now, the customers are not going to tell us, like, the customers are not going to tell you what to build, but on a daily basis, you're kind of interacting with them and you're getting feedback and, like, oh, this is the problem I'm having. Now, it's the job of the front end engineer and the product designer to come up with solutions to, like, okay, how do we make this experience better for the customer? The product designer can come up with a visual design of what that should look like. But now a front end developer will then come and say, hey, okay, I need to create these components this way. I need to think about like the architecture of how to make this idea come to life visually as a real product. Like there is an interface, there is a design that happens where you can just see visually and imagine what should be done. But what the front end developer does every day is just basically implement and think about how do I write code to bring this to life. It's like, how does an architect look at a plan, or sorry, how does a builder look at a plan or at the foundation and build the structure and bring it to life.
So yeah, in one line, let's say I do no code development with WordPress, where I drag and drop stuff on the front end, or say I'm going to do some painting with, sorry, not painting, but yeah, design with Figma, user experience design, with Figma. Can I just like, how easy is it from just translating a copy content? The simple line of code, right? Just copy the color and paste it, is that it? Is there like
Yeah,
technical details that I can paste?
yeah. If I get you right, you're asking how, like, let's say design has been done in Figma, how what's the process of getting it to an actual product? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, yeah, like
Okay.
like should I come into the front end development space with the expectation that once I can just make beautiful designs or understand how beautiful designs work on Figma, or maybe when I have a good UI design, I can give me good design, I can just copy those stuff, paste them, and then turn them to code, and then easy peasy. Or what's the technical expectations
Um,
that I should come with?
yeah. So if you want to be a front end developer, now again, the way you structured the question, I would have structured them differently. So I'll tell you why, which is like I'll tell you, give you an example of myself. So when I wanted to start building, my goal was what I really was trying to do is I wasn't trying to be a web developer or a software developer. I was trying to make stuff, right? And
Oh, okay.
what I needed to do was to say, okay, what is there to make? Okay, well now I can write code. What does this code do? I can make front end, I can make back end, I can make software. I can make something like Facebook and people will use it. That's exciting to me. Like so that made it look like, okay, well, if I had to design on Figma and I had to write my code in front end and I had to write the back end, I'm willing to do that. Now that's not the same now for most people because we now have the real option to like decide where you want to go. Now, how does that connect to the question you asked? It's that, well, that question is so when you want to decide like, okay, how do I get from here to here, or should I choose, is it easy to do this? It's like, well, what do you like to do? What would you like to do every day? Would you like to create stuff? Like if you like to create stuff, then that's not like you should just go ahead and say, what do I need to do, and then just
Yeah.
design and then write your code. And but in terms of like actually translating designs to code, you're not copying the code and you're not looking at design and exporting it into code. That's there's some platforms. So Figma, I think Figma allows you to do that in some way, but it's not the most efficient, right? If you want to actually do, there's some assets that you could export from, let's say, Figma and use them like your colors and like, some structures, but it doesn't always work. And the Figma designer we need to do a lot of work in organizing so that when you export the little bit of code that you can export, then it makes sense. But that's not what you want to rely on. Usually, when the designs are made on Figma or any design platform, what the front end engineer has a visual representation. It just makes their life easier. And now they know exactly what to design, and they have like an end-to-end um, visualization of what they're supposed to bring to life. and they can think better that way. The more information you have about what you're trying to build, the easier and faster you can build. And so that's usually why front end, UX design, Figma and things like that are useful. So yeah, you still have to just write your code basically. Look at the design and convert it to actual.
So yeah, I like how you were able to clarify that. Hey, you shouldn't be looking out for just technical difficulty there. Build stuff. Are you excited about building stuff and you want to do that every day of your life? So just go ahead and get started. Yeah, I hope
Yeah.
you take that out. I guess I want to like throw in a question that gets people a lot more excited. Usually people expect this question at the end, but yeah, what's like the current expectations for engineers generally and maybe more precisely content developers? I know that's like a small tips, but what should we expect? What kind of organization should pay this range? I guess get people excited about
Yes.
the pay
So
expectations.
what? So on a day to day, like, so first thing is if you're going to be a front end engineer, especially on the web, you can't escape JavaScript, right? So you can't escape JavaScript as a technology. What you be so as a front end engineer, you be working with JavaScript, and JavaScript can be a very stressful language. I'd say like um, I sorry, I can see salary expectation. Am I supposed to? Is that the question you're
Yeah,
asking?
yeah,
Sorry,
okay, fair expectation, yeah.
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
very sorry.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So as an engineer, sorry, I thought we were still in the previous question. So for salary expectations, I would say that it depends, right? It depends largely on where, so on different factors like where you are, your location, where your company is, um, what level of experience do you have, and what is like the compensation structure of your company as well. So your location, your organization, and your skill level. So and I'll give you different numbers, and these are speculative. We can change with organization again, with geography, organization, and your skill level, right? Depending on the organization. I know for sure that engineers and like front end engineers don't necessarily earn different less than back end engineers. They just have different responsibilities and they grow differently into their roles. But in terms of numbers, like as a front end engineer, if you're entry level, let's say on your first internship, depending on the organization, you could earn between let's say 80K and 150, 200K, depending on how good you are and depending on the organization. I know that, and this is very speculative, right? It's like in Microsoft, I know that Microsoft has paid their interns 500K, right? That's like somebody that is still in university. That's a lot of money. It's like,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
So it's very, it's like you could I could tell you you earn 200K and then you could be earning $1,000 or you could be earning 1,500 even as an intern in a foreign organization. But on a standard level, here's what to expect on a much more standard wide range level. I mean, as an entry level engineer and the front end, you could earn between 200 and 250K, really, right? If you had one or two internships and you really know what you're doing, you've not had lots of experiences, a proper organization, a standard startup should pay you that much, between 200 and 250K. And as a mid-level engineer, I would say you could be earning between 350 to 500K, 550K net. And that's, I think, what most startups pay in Nigeria. And I'm using Nigeria as a context right now, so for Nigerian startups that I know. So as mid-level front-end engineer, you could be earning between, like I said, 350 to 550K. Then as a senior engineer, depending, so as a senior, it just goes up, right? Depending on how many years and where you're working. So as a senior, it could be from between 700 to a million naira plus, right? So usually you could earn that much in Nigeria, quite certainly. Um, when you're thinking about like foreign jobs, entry level, you could still be, I mean, you could still be earning, it can increase. So think about as an entry level in other markets, if you're working remotely, for instance, a junior might then earn what a mid level will earn here. Um, a mid level person might then earn what a senior will earn here, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? So you can just shift it around that way, shift it up that way, and see what's possible. But again, don't take my word for it. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of what should I call it? differences that would occur depending on your experience and where you're coming from. But you can just to get yourself encouraged to get started, know that you can actually earn that much, and that's an average. Like you could get that if you're good enough.
Alright. Yeah, I think that part gets exciting. You know, because, I think be an intern and earn how much passion work at Microsoft. I think I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Okay. So something that Microsoft is, as much as it's back end, so who should not be an engineer? Talk about say personality,
Okay.
who
All right.
look at reputation and all. Who should be an engineer?
Yeah. So who should not be an engineer? In terms of personality, I wouldn't categorize it as like, oh, extrovert, introverted, or sanguine, whatever, all those personality types, because I think anybody in that spectrum can be an engineer and still succeed. It's not really, but I think that it's easier for introverted, more introverted people to succeed and go faster in the field. And why I say that is because software engineering is a um, very intellectual. I would say it's highly stimulating intellectually. So it requires a lot of calmness and deep thought process. I'm not saying that um, extroverts cannot think deeply. That's not correct by any form of shape. But you're more likely to be able to do the job if you are um, if you're more introverted. That's like a thing that is very common in the field, and I'm saying that because most of my friends are like that. So more people, there are more introverts in the field than there are extroverts. Now, again, another thing that I know about psychology in terms of like human behavior is that um, there's a trait called there's a trait in humans called conscientiousness, right? So it's just like it's a trait that predicts how it's part of the trait that might predict how well you can do as a software engineer or in this kind of fields of engineering, right? So what it does is because as an engineer you're solving problems. Every single thing you do seems like you're trying to solve a problem. Like every single thing you do seems like there's a hurdle to overcome, no matter how small. So that's really what it's like every single day as an engineer. So for someone who is highly conscientious, they can handle that kind of pressure consistently for a long period of time. But if you can't handle that kind of pressure consistently for a long period of time, I would say that it might be a bit more difficult for you to handle to be in that space. And I also say smartness. So what I mean by smartness is IQ. Um, I know that it's difficult to hear this for most people. The truth is that the different IQ ranges, right? Like IQ is a thing. That's the truth, right? And there are extremely smart people and there are not very smart people on the left. But for software engineering, actually you just need to be a little bit above average to be able to succeed in terms of IQ. And what that means is if you have an IQ of between 110 to 120, you're not exceptional, but you are more than average. You're above average. The average IQ globally will be somewhere around, which is like, hey, you can do normal arithmetic, you can do stuff, and But if you want to be an engineer, you don't need to be exceptional in terms of IQ. You don't need to be like Bill Gates to succeed, excel, right? You don't need to be that. You just need to be able to think well. And in terms of IQ, the number you put to that is around, let's say, between 100 and 120, and you're good. And most people actually have that. Um, I'll say 40% of the world population have that capability. Most people are average in their IQ in the world. So I would say that if you're listening to this, you probably, if you have a computer today, there's a chance that you can write code and succeed um, there. I guess that's
Something I also going to look out for is maybe being able to stay serious computer for long hours. I think for engineers they
um
do have like have very long training hours maybe compared to people who do say like just talk to people, talking to your laptop and talking to someone from
yeah, yeah,
anyway.
yeah. So I think you have to have some tenacity. You have to be able to stay with problems a lot more. But again, honestly, I can tell you what it is, right? Because I can't tell you exactly like
Yeah,
this is why you should
exactly.
be an
Like,
engineer
it's
because
not this or
you should
that. It's not like.
yes, it's like you should get into it. Like you should definitely try it out. I'm just saying that these are the kind of things that are most likely to happen to you. You get bored, you have to be tenacious, and in most things in life that's the case. But again, if somebody is more likely to succeed, let's say as an online personality, you might be going through stress while you're talking to people, but maybe that's what you're really good at, and maybe that's what really ticks for you, and you can be doing it while you're stressful. If I'm stressed, I can't talk to people. Like I can be in a party and talk to
Yeah.
people easily when I'm stressed. But I can sit on my computer. I could be stressed and I'm on my computer and I keep coding. I just drink cold water and I'm good or coffee. So those are kind of like the nuances that you need to take into consideration when you're trying to decide if this is something you want to take up. Just like yeah, it's a bit stressful and very lonely. It can get very lonely most times. So how do you deal with loneliness and like being by yourself and like all these kind of things and stress as well.
All right. So yeah, about this time we're trying to get people started. We're hoping they're excited enough to want to get into the engineering space and maybe specialize in content creation. I mean, of course, why not? I'm a content. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
mean, we are there watching this. Guys, get started. I just want to get started already. And then something you should also look forward to, like the next question, you can like start them off. It's like, so how do I get started? How do I accelerate my learning pace? Let me just on content and 3 years. I still learning CSS and before moving on topic of no touch. And
yeah,
finally, how do you become CTO or co-founder? But yeah, that was a fun
right.
note. But let's see how do you get started? How do you write the first hello word? Yeah,
Yeah, I need to take note because I think there's a three questions. So how do I get started?
yeah.
What do I need to do? And then how do I become a CTO? That's a very interesting question. So what do I learn? So I'll say, okay, so from the first question, how do I get started? Which is like, okay, what exactly do you need to get started? See, now it's a global village. The world is out there. The internet is the greatest blessing of our generation, I would say. And all you need to just do is go on Google and type how do I learn content, how to become a content engineer. Right? You don't even like that question, like it's easy. In fact, I guess text semester is going to help you solve that. But again, it's like to be more specific, it's like this, right? You want to get started in content development, you have to learn a few things, right? You want to get from zero to like one, and like okay, now I'm trying to be a software content engineer. You have to learn the tools that help you become a software front end engineer rather. And some of those tools are essentially CSS, HTML, JavaScript. Those are like the three primary tools that will get you to become a content engineer. Um, and you can get access to all of these things online. Like you can, and I know tech. So one thing that I also struggle with, which is why tech semester is quite interesting, is I think what you guys are doing. Are you well? Let's not get into that. But essentially, one of the things I struggle with is finding all of these sources and putting them together in the order. And so it took me a long time to actually get from zero to one. Right. So, but
So
what you
yeah,
want to do is
we're gonna attach like resources for them, like the links to free materials and recommended courses to get started.
yes,
There's
yes.
getting started with the resources, but there's getting started knowing how you got started. That's what we'll get.
Yeah, yeah. So getting started really is just like picking up the technologies. And what are the technologies? The HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to get started, right? Learn those things, see what they can help you do, see how you can use them to create whatever front-end software you want to create. For instance, you could use FreeCodeCamp are like tools that you could use, and I'll let Harvey share some of those resources with you guys. But also um, how do you become a CTO, right? Um, that's interesting. So, who is the CTO first? It's like the, the title is Chief Technology Officer, and so you have to be quite versatile with technologies already, which is like you need to have written code. That's very useful. You need to have done front end and back end to an extent, or just know enough about them so that you can lead people. Because the Chief Technology Officer role is not necessarily an engineer. It's not a role that you're not necessarily writing code every day, depending on where you're at in your journey. What you're doing mostly is leading people and making decisions. At the early stages of a startup, what you're doing also is like you're writing code, right? Like making all decisions around how should we build stuff, and things like that. So, how do I become a CTO in the shortest time? just learn as quickly as you can. Well, actually, to be actually very saucy, I would say that just go and start a startup and be the main technical person. So just think of an idea. What's the fastest way, or the how do you become a CC in the shortest time possible? Think of an idea, start building it, and go to your LinkedIn profile and say, I'm the founder and the CTO of whatever I'm building. And that's how you become a CTO.
Okay.
Um,
Let's go
yeah,
in 3 months.
exactly. Like,
Okay.
but to be very honest, to be much more, just learn, right? Learn and be a leader, right? It's not just now being a CTO is not just writing code or knowing what code to write. It's also being able to make the best technical decisions, and that usually will come with some experience. Like I'm CTO of my startup, but I mean, I barely know what the CTO of Google knows right now. You know what I mean? And so there's always a difference between when you say
Okay.
CTO. Yeah, I'm a CTO, but what I'm building is different. So it's like you're leading something, and you have to be able to communicate what you're trying to build, what you're trying to get your team to build and achieve. What are the goals of your organization as a whole, and what are the technical what do you need in terms of engineering to get to that. So really, you just need to learn all these technologies, learn the things you need to learn quickly. Be a front-end engineer. It's useful to know a lot about back-end as well, DevOps and all these things. You don't need to know everything, but you need to have a fair idea of how these things work so that you can lead people to actually do execute and execute for the purpose of wherever you're leading your organization or startup.
So yeah, this is actually not supposed to be a very technical session. It's actually supposed to inspire you to want to get started and to actually get started. So yeah, that's why I asking you two questions. The typical question should be how long do I need to learn for to be employable. But you should also that doesn't also have a fixed answer.
Yeah,
Exactly
I mean,
maybe
so this, no, actually, even to that, to speak to that, how long do you need to learn for? Honestly, you can get very lucky. You can learn for 3 months and you're good enough, and you can get an internship, right? Or you can accelerate your career that way, right? You get your first internship, you do it for 6 months, maybe depending, or 1 year, whatever. You get your first job, proper job, and you can grow. You can really grow very fast. Depending on how intelligent you are, maybe, and how good you are with your stuff, right? If you're good with what you do, you can really get to a very quickly. In a year, you could really skyrocket your growth. I'm not even joking. There's a lot of potential in this space, and so you should just work hard. I think hard work and consistency, yeah, and consistency is important. In this field, I'd say. Are you doing okay?
yeah, sorry, I had a glitch from my end. I'm back.
Yeah,
So
no
yeah,
problem.
so on a closing note, I don't know, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So on a closing note, we'd like to see is there anything that you probably think in like inspire people who are thinking, should I go for
I think you broke out
okay,
for a
yeah,
bit.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't
exactly.
hear.
I'll just take the game. I'll take the game. All right. So yeah, on the closing note, not exactly like technical stuff for maybe limited audience that are, looking to get this equally. Sorry, the internet is glitching. I'm very sorry. So yeah, on a closing note, not on technical side, yeah. For a bunch of audience that are looking to choose between front end, back end, data analytics, AI, sales and marketing, affiliate marketing, and CM and all of this stuff. What's something you think to let out, inspire them to come to the brand startup stuff, and what will be a closing note as we round up the session?
Yeah.
Any other
First
question
thing is,
that I could share?
Yeah, so first thing is I definitely think this is an exciting place to be like in engineering because front-end engineering, back-end, technology in general. Um, and the reason I say that is you can learn by yourself. There is a lot of opportunity to build stuff. And so what I would say to anyone listening who is maybe trying to transition into this space is like, hey, please give it a shot. Right? I talk to people every time, okay, not every time, but many times I've met people on like Uber drivers, and they're like, hey, I'm sure you do tech. Can you tell me how to get started? I'm like, hey, by all means, take my number, message me on WhatsApp, and let me know how I can help. Because I think it's really like people get into tech and in 6 months to 1 year they change their life drastically in terms of their finances, in terms of how flexible their life can be. And so I think that if you're looking for that switch, if you're not satisfied with what you have right now, um, and you've heard and you're watching this video, you should definitely give it a try. Give yourself 3 months, right? What I usually tell people is, if you have a job already and you're trying to move to tech, give yourself 2 hours every day. Like, do your job, right? But take 2 hours every day to practice. Do that for 3 months consistently. Don't miss a day. If you miss a day, then you have to take one extra month, right? I'm just saying, but just kidding. But you know, give yourself 2 hours every day, 2 to 3 hours. Practice every day after your regular work hours, and do that continually for 3 months. You'll be surprised at what you'll be able to do and what kind of opportunities you might even be able to apply to, right? And what you might be able to create by yourself. And so it's a very beautiful place to be now. Technology is everything now. There's data analytics, there's everything. But if you want to do front end, you know, um, please just go for it. Like that's really what I can say. You can make more money if you're not in oil and gas already. I guess I guess tech is the next thing, right? If you, in terms of money, like in terms of potential, if you're not in oil and gas, or if you're not in affiliate marketing, I don't know how much they make there because there's all this thing on Twitter and all. But if you're not in affiliate
Yeah.
marketing, as you said, or you're not in oil and gas, what else can you do? Please, it's tech, I think, because there's a lot of potential to increase your finances there. Also to make a lot of impact in the world, I think. So you should definitely give it a shot if you have the chance to.
All right. Thank you very much, Daniel Sinere. And in case you missed introduction, he's co-founder of, I think, founder, yeah, he's the founder and
Yeah,
CTO
it's
at
co-founder.
Vol
Of
Credit. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
please
just
check
wanted
out
to,
your
I think
credit.
I've started.
Yeah.
Yeah, please do check out. Yeah, what does Vol Credit do? Yeah, please explain on that. Sorry,
No, no,
for
I
the
mean,
listeners.
we're
People don't know
building
what
the.
does Vol Credit do. Want to know? So
Yeah,
it makes
I'll
sense,
share.
or so you say technically, yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
essentially, I like to describe. I personally, that's not our marketing strategy, but I like to describe Evolve Credit as the credit infrastructure for content. That's what we say, but also in very simple terms because people know Paystack and Flutterwave. So you can think of us as Flutterwave or Paystack, but for credit, so for credit payments, right? So we're building the payments infrastructure for credit on the continent. That's really what we're doing. So we're like Paystack, but for credit. That's the easiest way. So look at what Paystack does, but also in that way, look at it as like, okay, now if I have to pay on credit, make payments on credit, then I can use the Vault's technology. And if I have to accept credit payments, then I can use the Vault's technology, basically.
So yeah, like if you check out Evolve Credit on evolvecredit.co. Yeah, and check out Daniel Sinere on
Thank
Twitter
you.
and then LinkedIn. Thank you so much for helping us to actually get into engineering space, more precisely front end. So it's really nice having you on the session. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Right. Oh my God. Oh God.